Have you ever wondered why the female body, especially the vagina, has been both revered and feared throughout history? Why something so powerful, capable of creating life and experiencing deep pleasure, has been hidden behind centuries of taboo and misunderstanding? The truth is, the vagina is not just an organ. It's an entire communication system. It listens, it responds, it adapts. It carries messages between the brain, the heart, and the body. When a woman feels emotionally safe, her entire biology opens. Her blood flow increases, her muscles relax, her body becomes more receptive, not just to touch, but to connection. Science now confirms what women have always intuitively known. The vagina is deeply connected to emotional state, trust, and presence. Have you ever paused to consider that the vagina, the most private part of the female body, might also be the most intelligent? Not intelligent in the way we think of IQ or problem solving, but in a deeper, biological, and intuitive way. It is designed for connection and creation, but it's also designed for discernment, for knowing when to open, when to protect, when to receive, and when to say no. It carries the wisdom of millions of years of evolution, silently guiding women through cycles of life, pleasure, healing, and transformation. From the moment a girl is born, her body already holds this intelligence. Long before she understands what it means, her body knows how to heal, how to adapt, and how to protect itself. Every cell in the vaginal tissue is alive with sensitivity and purpose. It's self-lubricating, self-cleansing, and self-balancing. It has its own microbiome, a delicate ecosystem that can tell when a woman is under stress, when she's safe, or when she's disconnected from herself. And that's what makes it so extraordinary. This organ doesn't just respond to touch. It responds to emotion, to energy, to the quality of connection being offered. In modern medicine, we often talk about the vagina in mechanical terms: elasticity, hormones, pH levels, lubrication. But what if we also spoke about it as an organ of consciousness? Because every scientific discovery now points toward a fascinating truth. The body keeps score of emotion, and the vagina, more than any other part of the female body, mirrors the state of a woman's emotional world. When a woman feels seen, valued, and desired, her body naturally opens. When she feels judged, unsafe, or pressured, her body closes, even involuntarily. That's not dysfunction, that's intelligence. Throughout history, cultures have known this intuitively. Ancient traditions viewed the female body as sacred, as a vessel of life and divine energy. In many texts, whether spiritual or poetic, the vagina was seen not as something shameful, but as a portal between worlds. Creation itself begins there, not just in the biological sense of giving birth, but in the energetic sense of creativity, intuition, and emotional depth. When women are connected to this part of themselves, they access a natural source of confidence, empathy, and inspiration. When they're disconnected, they often feel depleted, numb, or unfulfilled, without even knowing why. Think about how society has conditioned women to ignore this intelligence. From a young age, girls are taught to silence their instincts, to hide their natural cycles, to suppress their sensuality. They are told to smile when they want to scream, to please when they need to pause. Over time, that disconnection becomes internalized. They begin to live from the neck up, analyzing, performing, managing, but losing touch with the deep wisdom that lives in their bodies. The result is not only physical imbalance, but emotional dissonance. When a woman's body says one thing and her mind says another, she feels torn between who she is and who she thinks she should be. But here's the empowering truth. The body never forgets how to come home. When a woman begins to listen again, to the subtle cues of her body, to the sensations that speak before words, she starts to awaken. She realizes that her vagina is not a passive organ, but a messenger, a compass that points her toward alignment. It tells her when something feels off, when her boundaries are being crossed, when she needs rest, or when she's ready to open again. That is the kind of intelligence that science can measure through hormones and brain scans, but only a woman can truly feel from within. Connection is the key word. The vagina is built for connection on every level: biological, emotional, and spiritual. Physically, it's one of the most richly innervated structures in the body, capable of producing pleasure that radiates through the nervous system and floods the brain with chemicals like oxytocin and dopamine. Emotionally, it's the seat of vulnerability and trust. Spiritually, it's the center of life force, creativity, and intuition. When these levels align, when a woman feels safe in her body and connected to her partner or herself, she doesn't just experience pleasure, she experiences wholeness. And yet, connection isn't only about intimacy with another person. It's also about the connection a woman has with herself. In a world that constantly pulls women outward, to be productive, to look a certain way, to meet expectations, turning inward becomes a radical act of self-love. Learning to tune into the rhythms of the body, to understand its signals, and to honor its needs is how a woman reclaims her natural power. The vagina, when respected and listened to, becomes a guide that leads her back to her center. Science now supports this ancient wisdom. Research shows that women who feel emotionally connected and bodily aware have stronger immune systems, better hormonal balance, and lower levels of stress. Their relationships tend to be deeper and more fulfilling. Their sense of self-worth doesn't depend on external validation, but flows from an inner sense of harmony. This is not coincidence, it's biology and balance. The vagina produces natural lubrication and beneficial bacteria when a woman feels relaxed and safe. But under stress, the body redirects blood flow and reduces sensitivity. It's the body's way of saying, I don't feel safe to connect right now. This is not dysfunction, it's protection. So often, women come to doctors saying they've lost desire, that something's wrong with them. But what's usually wrong is the environment, not the woman. When she feels pressured, unheard, or disconnected, her body shuts down as a way of preserving her integrity. The solution isn't more medication or mechanical fixes. It's understanding, empathy, and reconnection. Healing happens when her body feels safe enough to trust again. There's also a hidden creative intelligence within this organ. It's no coincidence that the same energy that creates life also fuels imagination and expression. Many women find that when they reconnect to their sensuality, they also awaken their creativity. They write more freely, dance more passionately, and speak more authentically. The same hormonal and neurological pathways that govern arousal also govern inspiration. The body, mind, and spirit are not separate. They are different expressions of the same life force, and that's where power comes in. For centuries, control over female sexuality has been used as control over female power. When women are disconnected from their bodies, they're easier to influence, easier to doubt, easier to silence. But when a woman is embodied, when she feels at home in her own skin, she becomes unshakable. Her confidence doesn't come from appearance but from presence. Her boundaries become clear, not defensive. Her intuition becomes louder than external noise. That's the kind of power that changes relationships, communities, and cultures. Imagine what would happen if we raised girls to understand this from the start. If instead of shame, they were taught reverence. If instead of fear, they were given knowledge. Imagine health education that doesn't just explain anatomy but celebrates it. Teaching that the vagina is not just a biological passageway, but a symbol of strength, sensitivity, and creation. We would raise a generation of women who trust themselves deeply, and men who respect that trust. Even in relationships, this understanding can transform everything. When a partner learns to honor a woman's pace, to attune to her energy rather than demand a response, intimacy becomes a dance rather than a performance. Connection deepens, not because of technique, but because of presence. The male body begins to mirror the same intelligence, learning patience, awareness, and gentleness. This is how true polarity and harmony arise. When I speak to women who have reconnected with this intelligence, they often describe it as coming alive again. They say they feel grounded, radiant, and peaceful. They make different choices that align with who they truly are. They stop settling for less than what nourishes their soul. That's what decoding the vagina is really about. Understanding it not as a mystery to be solved, but as a teacher to be honored. And the deeper we study it, the more it teaches us about life itself. It teaches that softness is not weakness. It's the gateway to depth. It teaches that true openness comes from safety, not submission. It teaches that creation requires surrender, not control. These are lessons the world desperately needs right now. Lessons that can heal not just women, but humanity's entire relationship with embodiment and connection. When women reclaim the intelligence of their bodies, they begin to live from the inside out. They lead with intuition, love with awareness, and create from authenticity. They remember that their worth was never something to earn. It was written into their biology. And as they rise, they invite everyone around them to rise too. Because when a woman stands in the power of her own body, she doesn't just heal herself, she changes the energy of the room, the relationship, the world. That is the intelligence of the vagina, the silent, sacred force that knows how to connect, how to create, and how to bring life again and again in every sense of the word. Have you ever noticed that a woman's desire seems to have more to do with how she feels than what she sees? That her arousal isn't just about the physical act, but about the emotional atmosphere surrounding it? That's because for women, anatomy and emotion are inseparable. The female body is built not just to respond to touch, but to trust. Without emotional safety, the body doesn't fully open, no matter how much physical stimulation there is. This is not resistance or mystery. It's biology doing what it was designed to do: protect, preserve, and wait for genuine connection before surrendering. The female anatomy is astonishingly responsive to emotional cues. Every nerve, every muscle, every hormonal signal inside her body operates as part of an intricate communication system. The brain, the heart, and the vagina are in constant conversation. When a woman feels emotionally secure, seen, valued, and safe, her parasympathetic nervous system activates. Her heartbeat slows, her muscles relax, and blood flow increases to her pelvic region. This is the foundation of true arousal. It's not a switch that flips. It's a wave that rises naturally when the environment says, "You're safe here." Safety for women isn't simply the absence of danger. It's the presence of trust. It's emotional alignment, consistency, and attunement. The female body can sense even the subtlest shifts in energy, the difference between a touch that's patient and one that's demanding, between a gaze that's admiring and one that's objectifying. Her body knows before her mind can name it. This is why emotional connection is the most powerful aphrodisiac. Without it, arousal feels forced. With it, pleasure becomes effortless. There's a biological reason for this. The vagina, the clitoris, and the surrounding tissues are densely packed with sensory receptors that are deeply influenced by the brain's limbic system, the emotional center. When a woman feels emotionally engaged, her brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Oxytocin enhances trust and amplifies pleasure by increasing sensitivity in erogenous zones. At the same time, dopamine and endorphins elevate mood and anticipation. But if she feels anxious, criticized, or disconnected, cortisol, the stress hormone, rises, narrowing blood vessels and dulling sensation. The same body that can experience intense ecstasy can also close itself off completely in moments of emotional dissonance. This connection between emotion and arousal is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's how the female body ensures that intimacy happens only when connection and care are present. It's nature's built-in safeguard, designed to protect a woman's most vulnerable state from misuse or harm. When we understand this, we stop seeing emotional sensitivity as fragility and begin to see it as biological intelligence. Her body is not resisting pleasure, it's demanding honesty. It's asking for presence, not performance. Men often wonder why women need to feel close first. But what's really happening is that emotional safety opens the gateway to physical pleasure. It's the emotional equivalent of lubrication. It makes everything flow naturally. When a woman feels emotionally safe, her pelvic floor muscles release, blood circulation intensifies, and the vaginal tissues become more responsive. It's a symphony of chemistry and communication that begins not with touch, but with trust. Think about how often intimacy falters not because of lack of attraction, but because of lack of emotional connection. When communication breaks down, when there's tension or unresolved hurt, the female body senses it instantly. The same man who once made her melt with a glance can suddenly feel distant, because the emotional current between them has shifted. This is why emotional repair, apology, reassurance, vulnerability, is so vital. It's not just about mending hearts. It's about reopening the body's capacity to receive pleasure. In many relationships, this understanding could save years of frustration. So many couples chase chemistry through novelty or fantasy, when what they really need is safety and depth. They need to rebuild the emotional bridge that allows desire to cross freely. For a woman, words matter, tone matters, consistency matters. Her body listens to how she's spoken to, how she's looked at, how she's held. The warmth of those cues is what tells her nervous system, you can let go now. And letting go, that's the essence of arousal. Female pleasure thrives in surrender, but surrender only happens in safety. When a woman feels she doesn't have to guard herself, when she senses that her emotions, her rhythms, her boundaries are honored, her body blooms. This is why in long-term relationships, emotional intimacy often becomes the most powerful form of foreplay. A shared look, a kind gesture, a moment of deep listening. All of these are biological triggers that tell her body it's safe to desire again. On the flip side, when emotional safety is missing, arousal becomes a struggle. Many women report feeling disconnected from their bodies, or that their desire has faded without explanation. But it's rarely random. The body stores unspoken emotion, resentment, fear, rejection, and those emotions create tension in the pelvic region. The muscles tighten, the breath shortens, the energy flow stops. In this state, pleasure feels distant, even uncomfortable. It's not that the body forgot how to feel. It's that it's holding on to too much that hasn't been released. Healing begins when emotional safety returns. Sometimes that starts not with a partner, but within oneself. A woman learning to feel safe in her own body again, through self-compassion, mindfulness, or therapy, can reignite her natural capacity for pleasure. When she stops judging herself, her body softens. When she allows herself to feel rather than numb, her desire reawakens. Emotional safety is not something only others can give. It's also something a woman can cultivate by creating peace within herself. Science supports this idea. Studies using brain imaging have shown that in women, arousal activates the same brain regions linked to emotion, memory, and social bonding. That means that desire isn't isolated. It's woven into her sense of connection and belonging. When she feels emotionally fulfilled, her arousal centers light up more intensely. When she feels lonely or criticized, those same areas dim. Her body doesn't lie. It translates emotion into sensation with incredible accuracy. This is why open communication is one of the most powerful tools for sustaining intimacy. When partners talk honestly about feelings, fears, and needs, they create a climate of emotional transparency that directly enhances physical connection. Vulnerability becomes the spark of attraction, because when a woman feels emotionally understood, her guard dissolves. She stops performing and starts feeling. Her body no longer asks, "Am I safe?" It starts asking, "How deeply can I experience this moment?" The female body, in its design, teaches a profound lesson about human connection. It shows that arousal is not about control but about surrender. It shows that the pathway to pleasure is paved with empathy, presence, and emotional truth. It reveals that the greatest stimulation doesn't come from what's done to her body, but from what's awakened within her heart. In this sense, emotional safety becomes the foundation of erotic power. A woman who feels safe in her own body radiates confidence and sensuality without even trying. Her arousal is no longer conditional. It flows naturally from her sense of inner harmony. She knows her worth, and that knowing changes the energy around her. People feel it. Partners feel it. It's the kind of energy that can't be faked. It comes from within. We also have to acknowledge how trauma and emotional neglect can interfere with this process. When a woman has experienced betrayal, coercion, or judgment, her nervous system learns to associate vulnerability with danger. Even years later, her body can react defensively to intimacy. Healing this requires time, patience, and most importantly, safety. The body cannot be forced open, it must be invited. Each moment of gentleness, each act of respect, each conversation of truth rebuilds the bridge between her heart and her body. This is why emotional intelligence in intimacy is not optional, it's essential. It's what allows two people to move beyond technique and into resonance. When a partner learns to attune, not just to what feels good physically, but to what feels right emotionally, the body responds with openness, trust, and deep pleasure. It's a dance of awareness where both bodies become instruments of communication. In truth, arousal is not a destination but a reflection. It mirrors the emotional landscape of the relationship. When there is honesty, kindness, and curiosity, arousal flows easily. When there is fear, resentment, or emotional distance, it dries up. The body simply echoes the soul's condition. Understanding this changes everything. It removes shame from the conversation. It replaces performance with presence. It invites compassion where there used to be confusion. So the next time we talk about desire, we must also talk about safety. Because for women, they are the same thing. The doorway to pleasure is lined with trust. The foundation of arousal is connection. And when that connection is nurtured, through communication, care, and emotional honesty, the female body does what it was born to do. It opens, it receives, it feels, it connects. That is the link between anatomy, safety, and arousal. It's not a mystery. It's nature's most elegant design. It teaches us that pleasure without safety is impossible, and safety without connection is incomplete. But when both exist, when a woman feels truly safe in her body and cherished in her emotions, her arousal becomes a language of life itself, fluid, powerful, and endlessly wise. Why is it that something as natural, as profoundly human as female pleasure, has been surrounded by centuries of silence? Why is it that science, for so long, studied every inch of the male body with precision while leaving the female body shrouded in mystery, misinterpretation, and neglect? The truth is uncomfortable but vital to confront. Our culture's silence around women's pleasure hasn't just limited understanding. It has limited connection, health, and even love itself. For generations, the conversation about women's bodies has been filtered through the lens of modesty, morality, and control. Pleasure was either ignored or framed as dangerous, something to be restrained, hidden, or denied. This silence wasn't accidental. It was structural. It was built into medical education, social conditioning, and even language. The very word vagina wasn't spoken publicly without discomfort until only a few decades ago. Female anatomy was either overly sexualized or completely erased from dialogue. And in that silence, an immense wealth of wisdom, healing, and empowerment was lost. Consider the history of scientific research on sexual anatomy. Until the late 20th century, even the clitoris, a structure with over 8,000 nerve endings, solely designed for pleasure, was barely mentioned in medical textbooks. Entire generations of doctors were trained without understanding its full anatomy or function. When scientists finally mapped it using MRI technology, they discovered it was far more complex and extensive than previously thought, extending internally like a hidden constellation. Yet for centuries, this organ was treated as an afterthought, a curiosity, or worse, an inconvenience. This omission wasn't due to lack of evidence. It was due to cultural discomfort. When pleasure becomes taboo, research stalls. When research stalls, misunderstanding grows. And when misunderstanding grows, women suffer. In their health, their relationships, and their sense of self. Silence has consequences. It leads to misdiagnosed pain, unaddressed trauma, and emotional disconnection. Millions of women live with conditions like vaginismus or low desire, not because their bodies are broken, but because they were never taught to listen to them. They were taught to be silent about discomfort, to feel shame about desire, and to see pleasure as something optional or indulgent. Science, when driven by bias, mirrors culture's limitations. For decades, medical studies were conducted primarily on male subjects, under the assumption that women's bodies would simply respond the same way, but they don't. Women's hormonal cycles, emotional regulation, and nervous system responses are profoundly different. The female body operates on rhythms, cyclical, intuitive, and deeply relational. Yet, when women's pleasure was left out of the scientific narrative, so too was the understanding of how connection and emotion influence physiology. This cultural silence didn't just limit what we know, it shaped how we love. In intimacy, when pleasure becomes a secret, it turns into performance. Women learn to fake arousal rather than communicate desire. They learn to please rather than feel. They learn to quiet their bodies to protect egos, to conform, to survive in systems that reward compliance over authenticity. Over time, that disconnect between body and voice becomes internalized. Many women lose touch with what real pleasure feels like, not because it's gone, but because it was never given space to unfold. In relationships, this silence creates a tragic imbalance. Men, too, are victims of it. Without understanding female arousal, they mistake stimulation for connection. They chase physical cues rather than emotional attunement. unaware that the real key to pleasure lies in presence, not performance. When culture doesn't teach men about women's emotional safety and biological rhythm, they grow frustrated by what they perceive as complexity, when in truth, it's simply communication lost in translation. We can see the impact of this silence even in language. Words like wet, tight, virgin, pure, they all carry moral or performance-based implications. There's no mainstream vocabulary for women's arousal that centers on joy, exploration, or self-awareness. We lack words for the subtle nuances of female pleasure, for the way it moves, evolves, deepens. This linguistic gap reflects an emotional one. If we can't name it, we can't nurture it. If we can't speak about it, we can't heal it. In traditional cultures across time, women's sexuality was often controlled because it was recognized as powerful. Myths of seductresses, goddesses, and temptresses were not just stories, they were reflections of fear. Fear of women's creative energy, fear of her independence, fear of the unpredictable nature of her desire. To silence her pleasure was to silence her power, and in many ways, that silence still echoes today. It's in the way we hesitate to teach young girls about their bodies. It's in the way media portrays female desire as something to be performed rather than experienced. It's in the way medicine still underestimates women's pain and dismisses their sexual concerns as psychological. But silence, when broken, becomes liberation. When women begin to speak openly about pleasure, not as a dirty secret but as a dimension of wellness, everything changes. The more we learn, the more we see that pleasure is not separate from health. It regulates hormones, reduces stress, improves sleep, strengthens immunity, and fosters emotional resilience. It's a biological necessity, not a luxury. To deny women knowledge of their own pleasure is to deny them a crucial aspect of vitality. This shift isn't just about personal empowerment. It's about reshaping how we view intimacy as a society. Real intimacy is built on mutual understanding, not assumptions. It's not about mastering technique, but mastering awareness. When couples begin to talk openly about pleasure, shame begins to dissolve. The conversation itself becomes foreplay, a bridge of trust and vulnerability. Emotional and physical connection become one. There's a reason why in cultures where sexuality is discussed openly, rates of sexual satisfaction, equality, and even relationship stability are higher. Knowledge breeds compassion. When men are educated about the complexity of female arousal, its emotional depth, its sensitivity to stress, its need for trust, they become better partners, not just lovers. They learn to listen, to slow down, to create the emotional safety that allows pleasure to thrive. When women understand their bodies fully, they stop apologizing for their needs. They stop faking. They start feeling, but for this to happen, we must first dismantle the shame that built the silence. That begins in education. We need to teach girls not just about anatomy, but about agency. Teach them that their pleasure is their right, that their bodies are wise, that saying no is sacred, and saying yes should be joyful, not fearful. We need to teach boys that intimacy is not conquest, it's connection. That understanding a woman's pleasure is not about control, but about care. This is how we heal generations of misunderstanding. Even in science, we are seeing progress. Researchers are now studying female desire in the context of emotional and relational dynamics, not just hormonal responses. We're learning how empathy, communication, and mindfulness enhance arousal. We're discovering how trauma healing restores sensitivity and connection, and perhaps most importantly, we're acknowledging that female pleasure deserves the same scientific attention as male performance. Imagine what would happen if we invested in understanding women's pleasure as deeply as we study disease. We would unlock new insights into mental health, stress regulation, and relationship dynamics. We would understand that pleasure isn't the opposite of discipline. It's the complement of vitality. We would begin to see that women's pleasure is a key to societal well-being, because when women feel safe, connected, and fulfilled, the entire emotional ecosystem of families and communities strengthens. The silence around pleasure has deprived humanity of balance. It has made love less tender, science less complete, and connection less sacred. Breaking that silence is not about rebellion. It's about returning to truth. The truth that pleasure is not shameful, that women's bodies are not problems to solve but mysteries to honor. That intimacy, at its highest form, is not about performance, but presence. Every time a woman speaks honestly about her pleasure, She challenges centuries of conditioning. Every time a partner listens without judgment, they help rewrite the script of intimacy. Every time a teacher, a doctor, or a parent chooses openness over shame, they plant seeds of understanding that will grow into healthier generations. This is the future we are stepping into, a world where pleasure and science are no longer strangers, where intimacy is built on equality, and where women's bodies are finally recognized as the brilliant, feeling intelligent systems they are. A world where the silence that once restrained us becomes the voice that awakens us. Because when women reclaim their right to speak about pleasure, they're not just reclaiming their sexuality, they're reclaiming their humanity. And in that reclamation, everyone benefits. Connection deepens, science expands, love evolves, the silence ends, and what replaces it is something richer than we've ever known. Truth, freedom, and the kind of intimacy that heals not just the body, but the soul. The vagina is not just a reproductive organ. It is one of the most intelligent biological systems in the human body, a dynamic center that regulates hormones, immunity, and even confidence. Science is finally beginning to understand what ancient traditions already sensed, that this part of the female body is not just responsive, but regulatory. It's a command center, a barometer of health, and a source of balance. It doesn't merely react to the body's state, it helps define it. When we speak about female biology, we often focus on cycles, the menstrual cycle, the reproductive cycle, the phases of fertility and menopause. But behind these cycles lies an elegant orchestration of hormones, estrogen, progesterone, oxytocin, and others, that influence everything from mood and metabolism to immunity and emotional connection. And at the center of that orchestra, like a conductor guiding rhythm and harmony, is the vagina. It responds to these hormonal fluctuations, but it also sends signals back to the brain and the endocrine system, creating a feedback loop that affects how a woman feels, functions, and even perceives herself. Let's start with hormones. The vagina and the brain are deeply connected through the vagus nerve and a complex network of hormonal receptors. Every time a woman experiences pleasure, arousal, or orgasm, the body releases oxytocin, the same hormone that fosters trust, bonding, and emotional warmth. Oxytocin is sometimes called the love hormone, but it's also a powerful regulator of stress and anxiety. It lowers cortisol, reduces inflammation, and strengthens emotional resilience. This means that sexual health isn't just about intimacy, it's about emotional regulation. When a woman's sexual system is active, respected, and healthy, her entire hormonal network operates more smoothly. Regular arousal and orgasm also stimulate the release of estrogen and endorphins, which play critical roles in maintaining vaginal tissue elasticity, moisture, and immune defense. Estrogen helps sustain the vaginal microbiome, a delicate ecosystem of beneficial bacteria that protect against infection and maintain optimal pH balance. When estrogen levels drop due to stress, age, or imbalance, the microbiome weakens, and the immune system becomes more vulnerable. So, in a very real way, the vagina's health mirrors a woman's overall health. It's fascinating how emotion and biology merge here. Stress, especially chronic stress, disrupts this hormonal balance almost immediately. When cortisol levels rise, blood flow to the pelvic area decreases, lubrication diminishes, and arousal becomes harder to achieve. The body, sensing potential danger, prioritizes survival over pleasure. But the reverse is also true. When a woman feels relaxed, safe, and connected, her vaginal tissues receive increased blood flow, oxygen, and nutrients. Her hormones align, her immune function strengthens, and her sense of vitality expands. Pleasure becomes not just an experience, but a physiological reset, a biological act of healing. The vagina is also home to a powerful immune defense system. Its mucosal lining and microbiota work together as the first line of protection against pathogens. Beneficial bacteria, particularly lactobacilli, produce lactic acid, maintaining an acidic environment that deters harmful microorganisms. These bacteria are living guardians of the reproductive tract, constantly balancing and defending. When the vaginal ecosystem is healthy, the entire immune system benefits. But when it's compromised by antibiotics, poor diet, chronic stress, or shame, the imbalance can lead to infections, inflammation, and even systemic effects like fatigue or mood changes. This is why emotional and sexual well-being are inseparable from immune strength. Every thought and feeling we have ripples through our biology. When a woman experiences guilt, repression, or self-criticism around her body, her stress hormones subtly rise, tightening muscles, constricting vessels, and altering the biochemical environment within her pelvic region. Over time, that internal tension weakens resilience. But when she honors her body, when she connects with it through mindfulness, movement, or intimacy that feels safe and nourishing, her body responds with openness, with vitality. Her immune system literally strengthens. It's important to understand that the vagina communicates with the brain as much as the brain communicates with the vagina. This two-way dialogue is what scientists call the vaginal brain axis. Every sensation, every pulse of arousal, sends neural messages that affect mood and cognition. That's why after orgasm, many women report feeling calmer, clearer, and more confident. It's not psychological fantasy, it's neurochemical fact. Dopamine surges, oxytocin peaks, serotonin levels stabilize. The body enters a state of harmony where self-perception shifts. The mind says, I am safe, I am alive, I am whole. Confidence, in this sense, is not just a mental state, it's a hormonal state. The biological power of the vagina extends even beyond intimacy. Studies have shown that women who maintain healthy sexual function, even into older age, have better cardiovascular health, stronger immune response, and more balanced hormone levels. Physical connection and arousal stimulate the release of nitric oxide, which dilates blood vessels, improves circulation, and supports heart function. It's one of the body's natural ways of keeping the system young and flexible. Pleasure, therefore, becomes an anti-aging mechanism, one designed by nature itself. Yet, in modern culture, many women are disconnected from this power. They are taught to suppress it, to see their bodies as sources of shame or inconvenience. When that happens, when a woman distances herself from her sensual intelligence, she also distances herself from her biological rhythm. The result is often hormonal imbalance, irregular cycles, fatigue, mood swings, anxiety, and a weakened immune system. The body loses the feedback it needs to stay in tune. The good news is that this connection can always be restored. The body never forgets how to heal when given permission to feel. When women reconnect with their bodies, through awareness, through pleasure, through self-compassion, they begin to regulate naturally. Their hormonal rhythm finds balance. Their immune systems regain strength. Their confidence grows, not as an idea, but as a biological experience. Because confidence at its root is chemistry. When oxytocin rises, cortisol falls. When dopamine flows, motivation awakens. When the body feels safe and alive, the mind believes in its power. We see this reflected in how a woman carries herself when she's embodied, her posture, her energy, her voice. There's a calm authority in her presence. She no longer needs to prove or perform. Her confidence radiates from her alignment, not from external validation. It's the kind of confidence that can only come from the inside, from a body that feels at home within itself. This is why understanding the vagina as a biological power center changes the way we think about women's health and empowerment. It means we must treat women's sexual health not as an afterthought, but as a foundation for overall well-being. Hormonal therapies, nutrition, emotional support, and sexual education should all be integrated because they all influence each other. You can't heal hormones without addressing emotion. You can't build immunity without supporting pleasure. You can't cultivate confidence without restoring connection to the body. We are entering a new era of medicine, one that honors what was once dismissed. Researchers are discovering how sexual health directly impacts immune resilience and hormonal regulation. They're studying how the vaginal microbiome affects mood, fertility, and inflammation across the entire body. They're exploring how touch, affection, and sexual satisfaction can reduce the risk of chronic disease. This is not new information. It's ancient truth rediscovered through modern science. When we bring respect, not shame, to the conversation about the female body, healing begins. When a woman learns that her body is not working against her but working for her, she starts to trust it again. She begins to see that her pleasure is not trivial, it's essential. It's the body's way of maintaining balance, of communicating wholeness. The same biological processes that regulate immunity also regulate joy. In a way, The vagina teaches us one of life's most profound lessons: that health is not just about survival, it's about aliveness. It's about the flow of energy, emotion, and chemistry that allows the body to thrive. When that flow is blocked by shame, stress, or silence, life itself feels restricted. But when it's honored, when it's allowed to move freely, everything else begins to align. Imagine a world where women are educated from a young age about the power of their biology, where they learn that their cycles are not inconveniences but rhythms of wisdom, where pleasure is discussed as part of health, not as taboo, where science, spirituality, and sensuality are no longer separated. That world would not only produce healthier women, but also more balanced societies. Because when women are hormonally, emotionally, and energetically aligned, the ripple effect touches every aspect of life: relationships, leadership, creativity, and community. This is the biological power of the vagina. It's the body's most eloquent expression of connection. It regulates not just the systems within a woman, but the relationships around her. It's the epicenter of harmony between the physical, emotional, and spiritual realms. And when that harmony is understood, honored, and celebrated, confidence ceases to be something a woman seeks. It becomes something she naturally embodies. That confidence is quiet, grounded, and unshakable. It's born from knowing that her body is wise, her pleasure is purposeful, and her biology is brilliant. It's the kind of confidence that doesn't compete or compare. It simply radiates. It's what happens when a woman's hormones, immunity, and sense of self move in unison, when her inner rhythm becomes her power. This is what it means to reclaim the biology of the vagina, not to reduce it to function, but to recognize it as a living system of intelligence. It's not just where life begins, it's where vitality begins, where healing begins, where confidence takes root. It is the heart of feminine biology, and when we understand it fully, we begin to see that the science of the body is also the science of power. What happens when we finally begin to understand female desire, not as something mysterious or unpredictable, but as something intelligent, intentional, and deeply emotional? When we stop treating it as a problem to solve and start seeing it as a language to listen to, everything about love, relationships, and empowerment begins to shift. Because female desire isn't random, and it isn't passive. It's a reflection of how safe, seen, and connected a woman feels in her own body and with the world around her. It's communication through biology, emotion, and energy all at once. Desire, for women, is not just about arousal. It's about alignment. It's about the nervous system feeling secure enough to open, the heart feeling emotionally safe enough to trust, and the body feeling respected enough to respond. When those conditions exist, desire blooms naturally. But when they don't, when stress, shame, or disconnection take over, desire dims, not because it's gone, but because it's protecting itself. Understanding this changes everything about how we view intimacy and connection. For generations, society has told women that their desire should look like a reaction to someone else's advances, rather than a force of its own. That has created a deep confusion about what it means to want. Women have been conditioned to prioritize being desirable over being desiring, to focus on how they appear, not on how they feel. This has left many disconnected from their own inner signals, their own intuitive sense of pleasure and power. When a woman starts to understand her desire, she reclaims her agency. She learns that wanting something, whether it's touch, rest, connection, or freedom, is not selfish, but sacred. Female desire operates like a compass. It points toward what feels emotionally nourishing and away from what feels depleting. It tells the truth about whether a woman feels respected, valued, or loved. In relationships, this understanding transforms communication. Instead of interpreting disinterest as rejection, partners can begin to ask deeper questions. Does she feel emotionally safe? Does she feel seen and appreciated? Is her nervous system calm enough to experience pleasure? The answers to those questions often reveal more about the health of the relationship than any surface-level discussion about sex ever could. Science has shown that for most women, arousal and desire are not spontaneous but responsive. They awaken in environments of emotional safety, tenderness, and connection. When a woman's body and brain perceive care, when her partner listens, When there's empathy rather than pressure, the body relaxes, and in that relaxation, desire rises. That's because female desire is deeply tied to the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of the body responsible for rest, healing, and connection. Stress, on the other hand, activates the opposite, the fight-or-flight response, shutting down arousal almost instantly. This is not about mood or mystery. It's biology. Understanding this reshapes relationships because it replaces frustration with compassion. When partners realize that female desire is a reflection of emotional safety rather than effort or performance, they start to nurture the environment that allows it to thrive. Affection without expectation, attention without agenda. These are the gestures that tell a woman's body, "You're safe." And when her body feels safe, her desire doesn't need to be forced. It emerges naturally, as a response to love rather than demand. But it's not just relationships that transform. It's self-worth. So many women have internalized the idea that their worth is measured by how much they can please others. They learn to override their needs, to silence their instincts, to perform rather than feel. Over time, that self-abandonment dulls desire. Not only sexual desire, but the desire to live fully, to express, to create. When a woman reconnects with her desire, she reconnects with her aliveness. She begins to see that her worth was never meant to come from how wanted she is, but from her capacity to want, to feel, to choose. Desire, in its purest form, is creative energy. It's the force that drives life itself, the same energy that fuels art, innovation, and purpose. When women suppress their desire, they often lose connection not only with pleasure, but with creativity, ambition, and confidence. When they honor it, everything reawakens. A woman who allows herself to want, unapologetically, becomes magnetic. She begins to draw toward her the experiences and relationships that match her vibrational truth. She no longer chases validation. She attracts resonance. There is something profoundly healing about giving women permission to feel desire without guilt. For centuries, female pleasure was feared, controlled, or dismissed because it represented power, emotional, relational, and spiritual power. A woman in touch with her desire is not easily manipulated. She knows what she wants and what she won't accept. She doesn't settle for connection that drains her. She seeks connection that elevates her, and that kind of clarity is threatening to systems built on control. But when women reclaim it collectively, it becomes revolutionary. Desire teaches women to listen inwardly. It says, "You deserve to feel alive." It says, "Your pleasure matters." It says, "You are worthy of joy without needing to earn it." And when that message finally lands, self-worth transforms from concept to embodiment. A woman no longer looks outside for affirmation because she's already receiving it from her own body. Every heartbeat, every breath, every pulse of pleasure reminds her that she is already enough. Relationships built on this understanding evolve from dependency to devotion. Partners who truly see female desire as emotional intelligence begin to communicate differently. They stop trying to perform attraction and start cultivating intimacy. They realize that passion isn't lost with time. It fades when emotional safety disappears. When both people nurture that safety, through honesty, empathy, presence, desire becomes self-renewing. It deepens with familiarity rather than disappearing into it. True intimacy is not about frequency or technique. It's about presence. It's about two nervous systems meeting in trust, two bodies communicating through energy as much as touch. When both partners understand that female desire blossoms in environments of connection, not pressure, they begin to approach intimacy as something sacred, something alive. It's no longer about seeking release, but about sharing consciousness, feeling fully seen and seeing fully in return. Understanding female desire also reshapes how women see empowerment. For too long, empowerment has been framed as achievement, success measured by productivity or independence. But empowerment is also biological. It's what happens when a woman's body and spirit align in trust, when she no longer suppresses her instincts to fit expectations, when she feels at home in her skin. That inner alignment gives rise to outer strength. It's what makes her voice clear, her boundaries firm, her choices authentic. When desire and self-worth intertwine, a woman begins to lead from embodiment rather than exhaustion. She doesn't hustle for approval. She radiates from her truth, She's not afraid to be soft, sensual, or emotional, because she understands that those qualities are not weaknesses. They are expressions of power. They are the very signals of life force that keep her connected to her intuition and purpose. Society often teaches women to suppress desire in the name of control. But what if the real power lies in understanding it? When a woman honors her desire, she becomes more grounded, more discerning, more confident. She can sense what nourishes her and what drains her. She becomes guided not by fear but by resonance, and that changes how she chooses partners, friendships, careers, everything. Desire becomes her inner compass for alignment, showing her what expands her and what contracts her. It's time to redefine desire not as a reaction, but as a resource. It's not something fleeting or fragile. It's renewable, cyclical, intelligent. When women treat their desire as sacred, they begin to care for it like any vital system in the body. They feed it through rest, through honesty, through experiences that feel safe and meaningful. They stop comparing themselves to others and start listening to the quiet language of their own bodies. That language says, you are allowed to want more. You are allowed to be moved. You are allowed to feel. When partners, too, begin to understand this, relationships shift from transactional to transformational. Desire is no longer something to be demanded, but something to be discovered together. It becomes an ongoing dialogue, a dance of presence, respect, and curiosity. And through that dance, intimacy becomes more than physical. It becomes a spiritual connection rooted in mutual awakening. The truth is, female desire has always been misunderstood because it doesn't follow linear rules. It's cyclical, emotional, and relational. It mirrors the rhythms of nature, expansion and contraction, blooming and resting. When we stop judging it for being different and start learning from it, we discover a new model for living, one that values flow over force, connection over control, depth over